Welcome to the Fundamental Principles in Action. In these short videos, we are exploring some of the practical questions that have come up about applying the fundamental principles to our Red Cross work. I always say that the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is a unique dynamic between, on the one hand, principled humanitarian response, and on the other hand, legal frameworks that can protect vulnerable people in humanitarian emergencies. And so these videos are allowing us to explore a little bit further what that principled humanitarian response looks like in action. The fundamental principles then are the agreed ethical standards, for that principled humanitarian response. There's a substantial body of international movement policy and practice that guides the interpretation and the application of the fundamental principles. Firstly, though, to put ethical standards into practice, you need to know their relative weight. And in this case, of the 7 fundamental principles, they are not all equally important. The work of Jean Pictet, who was an influential leader both in the development of international humanitarian law and also the governance of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, helps us understand that the most important of the fundamental principles are humanity, the alleviation of human suffering, and the promotion of human dignity, and impartiality, which is around getting assistance to where the need is greatest, non-discrimination, and the exclusion of personal bias. Those top two principles are the reasons we exist. By contrast, neutrality and independence are tools that we use to achieve the purposes that we set out in humanity and impartiality. And the 3 principles that are at the base of our imaginary pyramid, as we imagine these 7 principles, are the ways that we organize as a Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is characterized by unity, universality, and voluntary service. So we turn now to an issue that has come up in a number of different ways about humanitarian diplomacy and advocacy, and what it looks like for an organization that is guided by these 7 fundamental principles, including neutrality. Can the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement be part of a work that could be described as diplomacy or advocacy? In response to this question, which had arisen in a number of different ways in the years preceding this, about 12 years ago in 2009, the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement made a policy in 2009 that has promoted humanitarian diplomacy, described as and defined as, and I quote, persuading people to act at all times in the interests of vulnerable people at a local, national, regional, and international level, with full respect for the fundamental principles. And so this 2009 policy proposed that not only was advocacy permitted by the application of the fundamental principles, but it was necessary in order to apply the fundamental principles. So 4 points to make. Firstly, movement policy for over a decade now has been that this activity, the advocacy activity, is a form of diplomacy with the objective, I should say, of finding a solution to a particular problem, typically between states or between individuals. So advocacy is a form of diplomacy, which is about finding solutions to a particular problem, typically between states or between individuals. Number 2, diplomacy is an umbrella term and includes a lot of techniques and strategies. And those techniques and strategies might include advocacy, private negotiation, promotion of the fundamental principles and values, raising public awareness, and acting in accordance with other humanitarian agencies to maximize influence with decision makers. So diplomacy is the umbrella term, and there's a lot of activities that might fall underneath that term. Number 3, movement policy, as I mentioned earlier, is not only that these activities are consistent with our primary aims of humanity and impartiality, but that these activities are actually indispensable to achieving these aims. This point is now well established, and it's been reflected in the New Zealand Red Cross advocacy policy drafted about 6 years ago. I think we could look at that again and maybe tweak it and update it a little bit and amplify it a little bit for 2022 and on. The 4th point I'd like to make is that advocacy is a subset of a larger group of activities, as we've mentioned, of humanitarian diplomacy. And advocacy is about getting a specific policy goal achieved in law or practice. We have, I would propose to you, appropriately taken part in advocacy when we as New Zealand Red Cross advocated to double the refugee quota, for example, or advocated for a nuclear weapons ban treaty. There are within Red Cross and Red Crescent movement established practices for advocacy within the field of humanitarian diplomacy. For example, it's very important that our advocacy have an evidence base that closely ties the advocacy to the key purposes of our movement of humanity and impartiality. In practice, this all means that we engage to thoughtfully and respectfully influence decision makers to act to improve the lives of vulnerable people. That engagement might be behind the scenes or sometimes public. We engage because of our principles of humanity and impartiality. Because humanity, that is alleviating suffering, and impartiality, that is getting to where the need is greatest. Because those are our purpose, it's important and appropriate for Red Cross to take a stand on specific issues and to communicate this stand in an appropriate and helpful manner. Sometimes our stand might not be popular, but that is an important part of our focus on ensuring that those most vulnerable are cared for and supported.